to use any identifiable names or anything like that related to the story, but I did put up a tiny little video. I just felt like I didn't have enough time, and if I have to, I will literally draw out an image of the chain of things of how I remember it. And, for some reason, it's just something that I always remember because it was done kind of in fun. And so it was almost like there was a transition from, part of my college course. So I did the Pell Grant. And so I signed up for my college courses, and then some of them I tried to juggle around, such as the college experience, because I didn't feel like, I kind of I debated with them. I was going to use the word argue, but the word argue has so many different variables right now. I debated with them, and I said, I'd really like to do a class. I don't want to just do a class where I'm touring around the college. I felt like that was a waste of money, and I basically was telling that to the teacher. I said, I'm an adult. I've lived in Germany. I've lived with the United States military. I know how to read a map. I know how to figure out how to get from this part of the campus to another part of the campus. I don't want to just go around and get a signature from a whole bunch of different teachers. And that's basically what the class was getting the teacher's signature and signing off on the college experience. So basically it was like they had the students doing a tour of the campus, and it was called the college experience. I think it was the first semester. And I thought, for kids who are first away from home and they're kind of scared, maybe that does make sense. But I'm thinking, you know what? You could actually do that class within another class instead of wasting the student's time by stretching it out into a full semester. And that's kind of the same thing I felt about my college course that I took that was related to volunteering. What was it? Business management? I think it was called business management or something like that. And it was just basically had us writing up different resumes, and then I think it was called something. Oh, practicum. Practicum is what it was called. And so they had us, and that was required to graduate. Practicum was required to graduate, and they were teaching us that we were supposed to be volunteering in the community and working for free. And I thought that was such a ridiculous waste of money. But let's get to summer of 2002. So the summer of 2002, there was a company, and so I had a paid internship for the summer of 2002. And um, so what they did was the college makes a deal with a company, and so the woman who was the HR person used to be a teacher. And so right here, maybe you can see a chain of circumstances of some nepotism possibly. I don't know. But the HR woman used to be a teacher. She was a retired teacher. She went off to work for this corporation, this big company, and it was an animal health company. And so she said she used to be a teacher. And so she was the HR person. That they were the college, the business was sponsoring, and so they had grant money. They had gotten some government grant money. That's what she told us. And so kind of to introduce us into everything, they took us out to eat, and they took us to this Chinese restaurant. And so nobody there was actually Chinese. It was all American workers. Absolutely no one was Chinese. So it was kind of Chinese based food, and it was based off of it was probably pre-made and frozen. And so we were sitting up there, and I will tell you the geographical location, up in the Midwest, which used to be French territory. We were sitting up there in a restaurant, and with this uh woman. And well, there was what if I could say his name, I don't know his last name. His name was Kevin. He was a younger guy, and then there was an older guy who was a doctor, and he worked at the facility. I don't remember his name. And so I don't think that Kevin went with us. Maybe he did, but he was a little bit younger than the other two, so she was older. Um, the other guy was older, who was a doctor who worked at the facility. And so they were sitting there, and so we were students. Keep in mind, we were students. The majority of us were older. So the area that I went into, they said most people drop out because it's really, really hard. And that turned out to be true. They said people just don't want to commit their time into it, and that it's a lot of work, when you're having to figure things out by yourself. I don't know, maybe something was wrong with me that I loved it. I totally, completely loved it. Multimedia marketing is what it was, but it was surrounding an emphasis computer science and, um, just figuring things out for yourself. So we were sitting in the restaurant, and this woman, who used to be a teacher, now she's an HR person, and so they decided to they were opening up the fortune cookies, and they were adding the word "in bed" to the end of the fortune cookies. And I'd never heard of that before, but apparently it was something that they decided they wanted to do. And I thought it was kind of weird because because the teachers, the my college teachers back in 2002 were raising the issue about, well, is this appropriate for work? They were always saying that all the time. Is this appropriate for work? And so, like, there was a song that was by, I think I can say the name of the song without getting in trouble. The song, who sang it? It's getting hot. Nelly. I think Nelly sang it. It's getting hot in here. I can say that part, but then the last part. So there was a guy. I remember specifically his name was Chris, and he was singing it over and over and over again in computer lab. And the teacher, she'd look at me and she'd be like, "Is this appropriate for work?" She was repeating it over and over again. But it was part of our work though, because of the fact that I mean, that's what we were learning, was how to market things. So if you dive into the marketing part, which music, then when I think back to that, then it taught me about how music is marketing. But at that point in 2002, I wasn't thinking about music being marketing. But since then, things have changed. But let's get back to my internship. So my internship, for me, it afforded me the ability to quit my retail job selling clothes and be able to have some extra time just off of $5,000. But back then, $5,000 went further than it does right now. And so I stretched it out for a year. That $5,000. I stretched it out for a year, and I had a child to take care of too. And so they had 170,000. If I remember correctly, they had $170,000. So there was a guy who was I don't know if he was the president of the company. Let's just call it the lab. And so it was this place. It was this animal health place, and so he would call the college every once in a while and ask what was going on and what the holdup was. And, so every time we went to render from the camera, and so there was only like one or two cameras. So we had to wait to use the camera. So if another student was actually using the camera, we had to wait until they were done with what they were doing to render it from the camera to the computer. And so I believe, so they had some older cameras from the previous semester, but they knew there were some updates, I guess, that was going on. And so one of the teachers had revealed to me, she said that the business administration woman, I believe her name was Barb, and she said that that they needed to try to, for budgetary constraints, the college itself had to try to get by with software that was older because of the fact that they didn't have a budget to be able to they didn't have a budget to be able to continue purchasing software. And so even like my work study, I was installing software on the computer that was old and outdated on some of them, or they would get old and outdated software that was new to them under the college experience. And so let's get back to my internship. So my internship, um, it would take, oh my gosh, it could take 70 minutes to 90 minutes just rendering from the film. That we called it a high deviate at the time. That's what it was called. It was this very small, thin. It was kind of like a VHS, sort of like cassette tape, but it was a different. It wasn't the VHS camera. It was a different type of smaller camera, is what they were using. And if I remember correctly, I think the teacher told us they spent like about $5,000 on it. She said, we're going to leave it locked up in this cabinet, but if you guys need it, you just have to ask us for the keys. Then we'll give you the keys and we'll let you in there to get the cameras out. And so we would go and we'd get the camera. It was like checking it out from a library is what it was. And and so it would so it we would use the camera, we would record something, and it would take a long time to actually get the work from the VHS camera. Hello, Tanya Buenas. Hello. And so it would take a long time to get the work from the film camera into the computer. And not only that, once it got into the computer, then it would kind of bog down a little bit on the college computer. So every year, they told us, the teachers told us that they did a purge of things from the computer, off of the computer, removing everything from the computer. So the odd part, though, now I had no idea what was going on. Some of the other students had been going to college for quite some time. They were going to, they'd repeated courses, and so they were at a 2-year community college, but they were just repeating college courses. So some of them, they'd taken a course in networking. They already had a 2-year college degree. Then they just decided to continue going again. And so at that time, I'd actually heard of what they called professional college students. So to me, it really seemed more or less that we had a whole bunch of adults who were consistently taking college courses, because sometimes, like when you get the grant money, there was a bunch of leftover grant money that you could use for yourself, for your living expenses or for whatever you needed it for your books. And so, like right now, they're probably, my daughter, should I say that? Yeah, I can say that. Um, I believe she said there's there is a fee for, what did she call it? Now I can't remember what she called it. I don't know if there's a fee for her books or not. I never asked her. And her books are probably all online. So they're charging that fee for the college books now online. So they don't even literally have to print books anymore. Um, but I would imagine that there's probably a fee for that. And then there is like an internet fee or something that she had shared with me about. But I think maybe in the future she'll elaborate about that more, since it's her experience. Um, but I have looked at some of the areas of, and if they are transparent, they do talk about the fees. So if we had a lab fee, if we had any fees, it wasn't transparent. If we had computer fees back then, it was not transparent related to any of this. All I know is I had one flat fee for going to college, and we paid for our college degree, which was $40. And then there was a second one. My second one was an Associate of General Studies, which was a 1 year college degree. And I think that was the one that you get that's probably similar to a GED, but they just call it an AGS. And they said, well, if you want to pay the $40 to get an AGS, then you will have 2 degrees. And I thought, yeah, why not? Then I'll have 2 college degrees. So I got an AGS and my Associate of Applied Science degree. And so anyway, then, but I need to wait. Hello, Kimberly Esparza. Yeah. Oh, you're going to ride your motorcycle today. Beast Builder is going to go ride you're going to go ride your motorcycle. Nathan Griebel. And so anyway, so we were, doing this college course. And so sometimes, so she would tell us what parts, so we would even have to make appointments to go into the laboratory to record. And so they told us we had to have our hair in a hairnet. We wore white coats to cover up because they didn't want anything contaminated. Oh, a Kawasaki Ninja ZXR 600. Play basketball games, soccer, or basketball. It's just Kimberly. I know. I noticed that yesterday. Something came up about Kimberly Goofoil, something like that. She looks an awful lot like Erica Kirk. But, if you take and put some blonde hair on her, she looks like Erica Kirk with those eyes. So there's something about those eyes. I don't know if yeah, Kimberly Goofoil. And she used to, I don't know if she was married to Don Jr. or if she was dating Don Jr. And there was some weird picture and she had on that dress or something, kind of like that dress. You know how they talk about the one dress that changes colors. And and so, that's pretty much the only thing that my class was about back then. I I wanted it more, well, it was more about computers. There was another side of, because the thing is, the teachers were doing something else. The teachers were doing something else. I figured that out while I was in class. And, to me, actually, one of our students, this guy named Chris, he actually literally said, he's like, why do we even need teachers? He says, what are the teachers doing? And he raised such a great point even back then. I kind of thought the same thing too, because we also had guided self-study, which is very similar to the United States military correspondence courses. So let's wrap that all together and say, well, if we're basically teaching ourselves, why do we need the teachers? And now, in some instances, there probably is reasons to have teachers. I mean, like with doctors and things like that. But for like counting pills at a pharmacy, do we really need a teacher? Now, I know my brain got a little bit distracted, and I need to go back to my main story that I was trying to talk about. Be at your dad's house. Your dad's house, banana? Well, exactly. Like with baseball, we don't need baseball or farm leagues. What's the State Farm? As far as that goes, talking all night to Jake from State Farm. I mean, because the thing is there, when you're talking about interest-based, people are interested in things that they like. They're not interested in things that someone else is just always going to be putting in front of them because someone else thinks, oh, well, try this instead. Try this product instead. That's not going to work because people have their favorites. People have their favorite things that they like to do. And sometimes people have their favorite teachers that they like too. Now, I mean, I've had teachers who were teachers that equal that of a wet dishcloth. It's kind of the same principle as being married. You can have a husband who's has a personality of a wet dishcloth, um, but having a husband who has a personality of a wet dishcloth can be an advantage to a woman too, because if her and him get along well, then they get along well. I mean, but if I ever get there one day, I'll be happy to share it with you guys, but I'm just not there yet. And so in the meantime, um, you know, um, yeah, that's where I'm at. And so, what's funny? Well, actually, our teachers did share about their personal life. They kind of did share about their personal lives a little bit, but um, let me get back to the story about. Okay, so the summer of 2002. So it was kind of boring. I mean, because the only thing, so we had to schedule times to go in and record, and then we had to get, oh, you know what was funny too? There was this woman who worked at the place, and she had the identical same name that I did. And I always thought that was funny. She had the identical same name that I did, and they matched me up with her. So that's kind of where I realized that the name recognition thing was taking place. That the name recognition was taking place from back then. And I just thought that was weird. And I mean, it kind of made me feel a little bit uncomfortable because of the fact that, okay, when I went back there, I would have rather been matched up with, I wasn't friends with her anymore. It was kind of like, I mean, we lost touch, but it wasn't like we were not cordial to each other, but it was just it was kind of like she got sort of, it was that thing of that she started working, and then she was still a mom, but she was working, and so it was like she kind of had a different attitude. So I find that with women who have a job, and then they start making money, a lot of times they do get a different type of attitude towards other women. And then it's kind of like that sentiment of, well, you can do it too, even though, but yet at the same time, they don't voice the opinion of there not being enough jobs for all women to be able to have a job. And um, so I was doing a lot of, actually, there was another guy too. I don't remember his name, but we all had to wear hair like these kind of white cottonish type hair nets. And so we were doing pharmaceuticals, and the pharmaceuticals was a hot topic of, it was related to vaccinations, and it was a hot topic because of animals and animal health, and they had protesters from time to time related to the animals, but it was job creation all the same, and so they started cutting back um, to less buildings. And so anyway, the guy would come in, and anyway, it turned out that what we learned from just the couple of times that we went to eat, which I think it was twice, they took us to these Chinese restaurants, and all you can eat buffets, all you can eat food, and someone else was paying for it. And so the one woman was talking about this doctor all the time. And so there was this kid in class, then he asked me one day, so like we didn't talk outside of school at all. Really, sometimes we might email each other every once in a while, but I didn't connect with them on Yahoo Chat or anything like that. And the other ones were on Yahoo Chat at the school during class. One of the students was on Yahoo Chat during class, and he was always talking about his girlfriend all the time, and then she broke up with him during class, and he was really obnoxious sometimes. Um, but he was always raising some good points about things. And now I lost my train of thought of where I was going with that thought. Oh, he was the one who said he thought that our internship teacher and the doctor was having an affair. So he said he thought they were having an affair because of everything that was going on. So the teacher, she said she was getting divorced, and then she kept talking about her good friend, the doctor. And I think it had something to do with because of their demeanor. So she was really personable. The doctor was really personable. And so she had let it slip up to the class that she had let it slip up to the class a little bit that her and the doctor would go on business trips together on the weekends. That's what she told us. Now, of course, none of us were there to know if her and the doctor were actually going on business trips on the weekends. Now, and she did show us a picture of her house where she lived. She didn't tell us exactly where it was at, but she showed us a picture of her house, of where she lived at. And so I stayed in contact with her, and because she told us that if we ever needed someone for a oh my goodness, she told us if we ever needed someone for a job recommendation, she said she would be more than willing to give us a good job recommendation, because that was the only way that we were really going to get a job recommendation. And so in the process, so I had her business card and I saved it and I put her name down, because the thing is like, I was a former military spouse, and every place I had moved from, I didn't have anybody that I could put down for a job recommendation. I thought it was completely ridiculous. And so the thing that I had learned from one of my bosses when I worked for non-appropriated funding, he told me there was a way of signaling, because there was this guy who was fired from the job, and um, so he told me that if anybody calls for job references for anyone, to just give him the phone. Don't talk to them or say anything to them. And so I listened to him. I never said anything. And so then he sat there, and they were asking about the guy, and they asked if he would hire him back, and he said yes. And so I got off the phone. And so my boss and I, we had a really, really good relationship, especially talking to each other. I mean, it was just really, really good. And I could ask him a lot of questions. And unfortunately, I kind of felt like I could have pushed the limits and asked him inappropriate questions, because he went down that direction, and I tried to avoid him like the plague. He was talking to me about dating and things like that because I was single. But I asked him, I said, why did you tell them you would hire this guy back? And he says, that's because he needs a job. He says, if I would have said no, I wouldn't hire him back. He says, that's a signal to the other business people that I fired him. And so he was lying for his friend from church, because he hired a friend from church, and he knew he was a screw up. I really believe he knew he was a screw up from the beginning. And the thing is this man wanted to do the laundry however he wanted to do it. And so the housekeepers had a schedule of how they wanted to do things. And I had asked my boss one time, I said, okay, so how come you can't just kind of work with the man a little bit? I said, I know he does things backwards. He doesn't like doing it how you have set up, but isn't there a way that you can just drop things off And and so my boss, he says, well, no, he says, you've got to sign in when somebody's there. You've got to have somebody there. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then he had me go ride with him one time, to do while he was doing his job. He told me to go with him so I could see how it's done, because I was just thinking that the housekeepers were there all day long. I thought they were there all day long, but apparently they weren't. And but I think but the one time I was kind of resistant about going because I had fallen down the steps and I couldn't walk. And he says, and I said, I don't want to go with him. Now, I didn't like the guy because he was kind of trying to become fresh with me a little bit. And he was married and I didn't want anything to do with him. But this was at work. And so anyway, I, I, I didn't like him, and he smelled bad. But aside from that, he tried to have a decent personality up until the point that he yelled at me. And he spent like 20 minutes yelling at me when my well, let me finish the other part of the story though first. So I went riding with him even though my foot hurt. And so that I kind of understood, because my boss says, make sure he does it the right way. Go to these buildings first, and first. And, so I kind of had an understanding that they want it delivered at these certain times because that's when the housekeepers are there. They have other things they need to be doing throughout the day, such as the people who are working in the utility room, they have other things to do in the day, so they may not be specifically at that point. And so I went riding with him. So anyway, then my boss, he had to leave. So I was not, keep in mind, I was not appropriated funding. And so my boss had to leave. He left me in charge, as because I was a supply clerk. And so the other guy that was next to me, he made $1 more an hour than me. He eventually told me, and he made $1 hour more because he was delivery, he was supply, and he would. I would go with him too, though, and that's the funny part. I was doing my job on the computer, plus I was going with the other guy to do deliveries. We were hauling things up and down the steps. We were hauling. I would go with my boss too. We would ride, to get vacuum cleaners fixed at, local business that fixed the vacuum cleaners. So, instead of just throwing it away, he would take it to this repair shop and they would repair the vacuum cleaner, and it would go on a credit card. And so if it was something that they couldn't fix right there in the shop there, a lot of times it was just cleaning the hair out of the vacuum cleaner. That's kind of where I learned about the vacuum cleaners, was just watching the guy next to me, and he was forever just cleaning junk out of the tubes. But sometimes there might be something additional, because these were vacuum cleaners that were anywhere from, they were like the Hoovers, the Kirby's types, that type of vacuum cleaner. And so they would actually, uh, clean them out. And then if it still didn't work, maybe it was something in the motor. And so he would take it to the guy and see if he could get it working again, just kind of to expand the life of the vacuum cleaner. And so, so my boss was, always kind of asking me questions, and personal questions, very, very personal questions all the time. A lot of times I just didn't feel comfortable. I didn't want to talk to him because I thought, doesn't this kind of push the line? And I was literally working with all men. There was no other women there. It was all men. And it was even in a time frame of some other things that were taking place. So this other guy who did the deliveries, a lot of times he did it by himself, but then a lot of times if he needed help, I would go with him. And so I knew how to do his job too. I was the one getting paid less money, getting paid $1 less an hour, non appropriated funding. And I don't know if it was to do because I was a woman or what, but I literally had more work piled on me. But but this one time my boss had to go. His mother-in-law passed away, I believe, or no, he said his dad died. So his dad died. He had to go to Maryland. And so he was gone for a month. And so he was a GS position. And so he had a uniform. I didn't have a uniform. Him and the other guy had a uniform. I didn't. He told me, he says, just wear whatever. He says, you can wear shorts if you want to. He just told me to wear whatever I wanted to wear. He says, we will pay for boots for you. That's it. Um, he didn't say anything else. So, but when all was said and done, it almost felt like hazing. But during this 30-day period, he left me in charge, and this towel delivery guy. That's all. That was only his only job, was delivering towels and doing some laundry and things like that as delivery. And so he had big baskets. The towels were in the baskets. Someone else had already done it for him. All he had to do was deliver it the right way, deliver it at the right times. He had a hard time doing that. And so my boss had called, asked me how things were going with this specific delivery guy. And I said, well, he's not wanting to listen to me. So the night before, he had yelled and yelled and yelled. He was gaslighting me. Gaslighting into an argument is what he was doing. I didn't know that it was called gaslighting back then, but he yelled at me for like 20 minutes, telling me how he was not going to listen to a woman. He literally told me that. So when my boss called, I was mortified, scared to death to tell him what had happened. And he says, how are things going? And I said, they're going. He's like, how are things with this guy? I'm just going to use the word this guy. He says, how are things with this guy? And I said, I kind of was hee-hawing around. I said, he's doing his job. And he says, my boss says my name. He's like, come on now. You can tell me what's going on. And I said, well, he got mad at me last night, and he yelled at me for like 20 minutes, telling me how he was not going to listen to a woman. And so a couple weeks went by, and so there was a Friday that I had asked, that I had coming up. I'd already had it scheduled. There was a Friday coming up that I was going on a field trip with my son. I'd asked for the day off. They fired him on that day. So my boss fired him on that day. And so, so related to the workplace thing, there were some weird things that were going on at the time frame of when, from when I was trying to do things by myself. It was not working out very well for me. I mean, the thing is, I had a job. It's just that I was learning that I was getting paid less money. And then I was hearing on TV, it's like, oh, well, women are just supposed to ask for more money. It's like, well, the thing with that is, it's like, well, if you ask for more money, then you feel like you're at risk for losing your job. So, but the internship, though, the internship, that itself, gosh, I said things wrong because I didn't know how to say certain words wrong. And so that summer, what I did was I read through my book, and I learned the software program myself. I taught it to myself, not from the teacher. So I knew how everything worked before I went into the class. So the next semester was the class. And so I kind of had a little bit of a heads up related to the class. And I had a lot of fun with it, actually, because I just loved figuring things out and doing it myself related to how things worked with the computer. And it was only a 2-year course. It was just a Pell Grant 2-year course. So I guess I'm kind of in the same way. I've never cracked open a phone before or anything like that to see what's on the inside. I don't know how to do any soldering or anything like that. But I've never done anything like that. But I think I got an A in that course, but I'm not positive. And so anyway, that's all I have to say right now.